Well, good evening. Good to see you guys and gals. I'm Armenic collectively. Guyses, y'allses. Tonight is our question and answer night. So we have a series of questions that people have asked. Fantastic questions. Possibly the best questions there ever was. Really big questions. So I'm very excited about this. Let's go through them. Any questions before we get going? No? Okay. Yeah. Can I have Jason open us in prayer, please, before we get going? All right. So, we'll start off with a longer question because that way we can break it up and it's not, a bunch of stuff back to back. So, first question is actually a series of questions. Lent, why is it so important in some faiths? Why do we not do Lent? And what all does Lent entail? Meaning, what are all the rules? So, the first thing about Lent is I thought Lent was called because of past tense of lend, not associated with that. Lent is so named because of an Old English word, which basically means to lengthen, because the days are getting longer leading up to Easter. I did not know that. So if you were curious why it's called Lent, go ahead. Right. But what I was saying was the meaning of the word Lent. The meaning of the word Lent. That's from an Old English word, yeah. So Lent was first instituted in the 300s AD. I guess I should say it was first said by the church in the 300s AD, about 325 or so. But you can bet wherever there's a tradition that's kind of institutionalized by the church, it'd been going on for a while before that. So you should probably imagine that Lent was begun sometime in the 200s AD. And it begins with Ash Wednesday in the Western Church. That's not true of the Eastern Church. The Eastern tradition doesn't start out on Ash Wednesday. They started on the Monday that's called like the either Sacred Monday or Purity Monday. I forget what, they have a name for it, and I forget what it is, but like Eastern Orthodox will start on that day. But in the Western Church, we do we started on Ash Wednesday. It's what the idea of Lent is it's pretty much a reminder of our mortality and our separation from God. Just kind of a time to remember that place as we go up to Easter, with the resurrection and all that. It's 40 days, not including Sundays. And the reason why it's 40 days is because of the repeated imagery of the 40 days. The 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness, the 40 days of Moses, the 40 days of Elijah, just kind of a repeated theme that you see throughout Scripture, and that's kind of where it gets its idea of 40 days. However, not all people observe Lent the same. As I've already mentioned, there's a big difference between the Eastern and the Western Church, which has been going on for thousands of years. There's also other changes, such as a lot of the more American groups will maybe just do Ash Wednesday and Good Friday and call it quits. Other people will do the whole 40 days. So it really just depends on your tradition personally. Generosity is encouraged during Lent, but it is not like required. You don't have to be generous. It's just been a common theme throughout it. Let's see, what else? Originally, this is something I did not know about Lent. Originally, Lent was, the idea behind Lent was for those people who were preparing to be baptized, to kind of focus them, and for those people who were not allowed to participate with with Holy Communion. So, Holy Communion. So, basically, as time went on, they said, you know what, this isn't just for some, this is good for all of us, so let's all do it. So it changed from being for the select few to pretty much everybody. As far as, there's been a lot of changes that have happened with Lent throughout. the history of it. It used to be a lot more strict than it is now, and in the Eastern tradition, it's actually still very, very strict. For instance, if you're part of the Eastern Orthodox, a very strict diet, very much so laxed in the Western Church, comparatively speaking. Not to say that there aren't some Western churches, but by and large, the Western Church has just kind of gotten pretty relaxed about it. Beyond that, pleasures are oftentimes given up, but they are not required for Lent. You don't have to actually give up any pleasures for Lent. This is a common misunderstanding that you have to give something up for Lent. You do not have to give something up for Lent. It is highly encouraged. So, besides that, what is its importance? Well, like any ritual, its importance is very personal to you. So, traditionally, it has good meditative purposes. So if you need to be reminded of what Christ did in his resurrection and stuff, then Lent would be a good time to focus on that as like more meditative. But some people just go through Lent as a thing of trying to be good enough, so much to the degree that a lot of churches have actually put out things on their websites, such as the way that it doesn't appease God and it doesn't earn salvation. But still, the thought occurs with many religious people that Lent has some kind of special significance as far as getting in good graces with God. Kind of like how a lot of people say fasting, which I guess Lent would be a time of fasting. Let's see what else. And then it said on the question, it said, why do we not do Lent? It's not that we don't do it. I mean, you can. It's just that we as a church haven't really emphasized it because we're not really a ritual-driven church. Not to say that it's bad to be a ritual-driven church. It's just that's not really our culture. You know what I mean? Like, there's some churches that they just focus more on traditions, and that's fine, and then others don't, and that's fine too. Like, it's not anything you need to stretch too much about or stress too much about. But typically, you're going to find that churches are either going to be very ritual-driven or very outreach-driven. Not to say that you can't be both, but you're going to typically go one or the other. You're going to focus on those who are there, or you're going to focus on those who are outside. Every church does this. Every church has to figure it out for themselves. In my experience, I haven't seen too many churches be able to find a good balance. They always go to one extreme or the other. Let's see what else. There is a what's it called? A tendency in humans to try and make a ritual to give special significance. A good example of that would be there was this woman that went to this church, sweet old lady. She was known as the prayer mama. You know, she used to pray for everybody, loved her, everybody adored her. She died, obviously, as older people do, and they put a plaque in memory of her on one of the pews, just as a way of remembering her, which sounded like a good idea, but it quickly became not a good idea. It became where only certain people were allowed to sit there. They were switching out the pews for the seats, and not that pew, that's so-and-so's pew. And it's like, no, she's dead. It's not her pew, But it became a point of contention where now everybody's fighting about this out of good intentions. It just turned bad fast. Once again, so it's not that these things are bad. It's just that sometimes rituals get in the way of actually living out the faith. You see a lot of times Christians will try to outdo the Jews for having certain rituals. So like the Jews had their 40-day, their different times of fasting and whatnot. And a lot of times Christians have tried to kind of take up that mantle, forgetting that we've been set free from the law. So whereas it's not wrong to have rituals, make sure that they don't become consuming. They can give purpose to people. They can help unite the church sometimes. And it's not that they're bad. They're just by and large unnecessary. So if you want to do them, by all means, go for it. But it's not like, it's going to make you a better Christian or anything. So then this person asked a few other questions. Ash Wednesday, how did it start? I kind of just said that. Is it just a Catholic thing? No, it is not just a Catholic thing. It is in a large majority of the church. Obviously the Eastern and the Western. Catholic, a lot of Protestant churches, Presbyterians will do it, Anglicans will do it. I mean, just really a lot of people will do it. We're a part of a very much so a younger denomination called the Assemblies of God. And typically the younger denominations aren't going to focus so much on traditions as the older ones are. Another part of being institutionalized, not necessarily a bad thing, but just the way it is. Let's see, why is it done? We just look kind of like that. What does it signify or represent? already kind of looked at that. So the whole ash thing on the forehead and all that, that's to kind of symbolize the humility of our lowered state. Let's see. Do you think Easter and Christmas are very similar regarding the way they are celebrated? No. And I'll tell you why. I think Easter is more spiritual than Christmas. I said it. The reason why is because Christmas tends to be more, what's the right word? Materialistic. People tend to make it more of a commercial thing. The commercialism, that's the other word I was looking for, where it tends to be all about the gifts and the family and that kind of stuff. And so the meaning of Christmas has more or less been eclipsed by this idea of it's a time for family, not a time for the salvation of the world. No, not that. That's the thing about family, which is fine. I like eating turkey and well, no, I don't like eating turkey. I like eating ham as much as the next person, but I mean, it's not really, it's just Easter, on the other hand, tends to not be as commercialized. I mean, yeah, people have done the whole rabbits and eggs and whatever that's all about. And I get that Easter itself, there's a pagan thing. I understand that. But you don't typically have people flying into your house and having a big meal and exchanging gifts. Like, you might have a basket for your kids to, with candies or something, but nothing, over the top. But anyways... So no, I would say I don't really see much similar. And also, Christmas focuses more on the entirety of Christ, his birth especially, but also his life and his death and a lot of different things. Whereas Easter pretty much just focuses on the victory of his resurrection, which I feel like is with less fluff and more of the victory. I feel like it is more spiritual. And then the next thing is, are they both overrated pagan holidays? This is a common misconception. So what we do as Christmas and Easter is not a pagan celebration. Yes, I understand the word Easter is a pagan word. I understand that. I get that. However, as the Christian church celebrates it, it is not a pagan thing. It is on the same day as a pagan celebration. There's a difference. If we were doing a pagan celebration, we'd be doing a lot of other things that we are not doing. So no, I don't think that that's what it is at all. Obviously, when the church first instituted these holidays, they specifically put them on pagan days to overshadow them because they were a part of the culture, and you really weren't getting rid of them, But with that being said, that doesn't mean that they don't have their own significance. You know what I mean? Just like Halloween has its own significance in the Christian tradition, that people in the world don't necessarily agree with us on that one. So then, let's see what else. Should we still celebrate them? As you wish. As you wish. And I'm not just saying it from Princess Bride. As you wish. Also, here's the thing. If you feel where you don't want to celebrate Christmas or Easter, by all means, skip it. It's fine. If you feel like these things are absolutely, by all means, do them. It's not going to make you better or worse, closer to God or further from God. Just do as you wish. It's really not that big of an issue. And my reasoning for that is actually from Colossians 2, which, thank God, the Bible talks about things where we don't have to talk about it without having the Bible address it. In Colossians 2, 16 through 17, it says, "Therefore don't let anyone judge you in regard to food and drink, or in the matter of a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of what was to come. The substance is Christ." Christmas is a shadow. Easter is a shadow. We have the substance in Christ. If you want to observe it, go for it. If you don't, that's fine too. Next question. We'll go for this one here. What is the verse you read when you do communion? And I wrote it down for you too. Okay? 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26. Though sometimes I switch that over with Matthew 26, 26 through 29, and Luke 27, 19 through 20. But usually I do 1 Corinthians. And so I've written it down for you. I've got it up here. What is a cardinal pope compared to a regular pope? Now, this question I didn't really understand because there is no such thing as a cardinal pope. So I'm going to explain what a pope is and what a cardinal is, and we'll just kind of see where that gets us. The pope is the head of the Catholic Church, although Catholics would probably argue that he's head of the church in total. Obviously, in the Protestants, we would disagree with that. We would say that it's Jesus. but teach their own, I guess. The cardinals are members of the College of Cardinals. So this is the basic idea of the Catholic Church. There's priests over the church, and there's bishops over the diocese, which is basically like an area. There's archbishops over the archdiocese, and typically speaking, the archbishops become cardinals. They're appointed so by the Pope, and there's about 125 of them. They are the ones who help the Pope with different popely duties that he's got, and also they're the ones who vote for the new Pope. So they don't have to be archbishops. They can be priests, for instance. Usually they're archbishops. Let's see what else. Maybe I wrote some notes here. No, that's pretty much it. They cannot vote for a pope if they're over 80, though. So once they hit 80, they can't vote anymore. So typically there's going to be 125 that vote for the pope, but that number might vary depending, obviously, on who is how old. Let's see. What is the next thing? Okay, when the Bible says it's still for today. When in the Bible says it is still followed today, or it is still name of followed today? Okay, I think I know what's being said here. Where did I put my Bible? Oh, there it is. So in 1 Samuel 30, verse 25, yeah, I know what's going on here. And this is something you're going to see not just in this part, it's actually in other parts too. But this one is specifically talking about 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 25, which says, "And it has been so from that day forward, David established this policy as a law and an ordinance for Israel, and it still continues today." The question is, today being still ongoing now? Well, for that you have to back up and see what it's talking about. We'll start in verse 23. "But David said, 'My brothers, you must not do this with what the Lord has given us. He protected us and handed us over to the raiders who came against us. Who can agree to your proposal? The share of the one who goes into battle is to be the same as the share of the one who remains with the supplies. They will share equally, and it has been so from that day forward.'" So basically what David is saying is, they're saying, okay, look, the people who were the frontline soldiers should get more than the people who stayed back. And David is saying, no, we're not doing that. If they stayed there, if they went with us, they're all getting equal shares. We're not doing this thing. And so is that something that's still followed today? Well, this is kind of one of those situations where there's yes and also no. And what did I do with that? Oh, maybe I already set it down. Yeah, I did. So this is one of the situations where it's a yes and a no. The reason why is because 1 Samuel is a historical book. So it was written in a historical setting. So as it's applied in 1 Samuel, what it's saying is, David said this, and he's the one who established this idea back then. But we're also still here observing this still today in Israel. So at the point that this book was written, it was still being observed, and that's all that he's saying. This is something that we do, and we do it because of what David said. That's all that he's saying. However, does it still apply to us? In a way, but also not in a way. First off, no, it does not apply to us because we are not Israelite. We're not in the Israelite army. So in that way, it's not going to apply to us. Not even that, but the new Israelite government does not function over the same ways that they do there. So even if you were in the Israelite army, you probably wouldn't have the same benefits. But then, yes, it does apply to us in the sense that we all, as a church, share in the blessings of the church, don't we? Right? I mean, when one of us wins, we all win, right? Aren't we supposed to rejoice with each other, right? So in that sense, yeah, absolutely. And also, in another sense, yes, there are no elites or favorites in the church. See what I mean? People misunderstand this all the time. I'm the pastor of the church. That doesn't mean I'm an elite in the church. Does that kind of make sense? We are all equals in the church. We're all equally God's children. My role is just different. My responsibilities are different. Does that kind of make sense? And also, God's going to judge me harsher for things that I do over somebody else. That doesn't mean that I am more than. It means that I just have a different role. So, in that sense, Yes, but also in this sense, no, because leaders do get different privileges than other people get. They also get different penalties than other people get. So in different senses, it does kind of apply, and in other senses, it doesn't. You really can't say a blanket, does it apply? This verse specifically, the idea might apply, but here, no, it does not apply because we're not an Israelite army, and we are not sharing the booty from the battle. Good question, though. Let's go to this one. What is my name? No, I'm just kidding. What was the purpose of Jesus going down to hell to preach? Who was he talking to at the time of his crucifixion? So this is something we've already looked at once, so I'm going to keep it kind of short here. Part of the issue comes from the Apostles' Creed where it says that he descended into hell. And that's kind of misleading. It makes people think that Jesus died and they went down to hell, and some people think that in hell he took the keys from Satan and stuff. No, none of that stuff. Satan never had the keys for stuff. No, that's something we get from Chronicles of Narnia. That's not something we get from the Bible. Okay, no. I mean, I like C.S. Lewis just as much as the next guy, but that doesn't mean that I agree with every single point that he had in theology. Maybe a more accurate term would be that he descended into the grave. That's, I think, a much better idea of what's being said here. There are two interpretations of this, and it revolves around when we die, where do we go? Okay. The first idea says this, that there's three different places. There's heaven, and then hell is broken up into two sections. So on one side you have the wicked, then there's a chasm in between, and then the other side has the good people. And they're there, okay? Then the other view is that there's just heaven and hell. There is no in-between place, okay? Then some people throw in limbo, and it's kind of like a variation of that, and we'll just skip that for now. It's just too long of a conversation. But when we look at books like Revelation, it seems like there's only two places because, it's talking about in Revelation the way that Jesus is there in heaven and the saints are there in heaven with him presenting their requests and they're, praying to God and all this different stuff. So it seems like they're all in the same place in heaven, at least in the book of Revelation. And then we also have the problem that there's not a whole lot of other verses that would give credence, or not credence, give ground to the idea of a third place. For instance, when Paul says to be absent from the body is to be present with Christ, that seems to imply that there's only the two, heaven and hell. Now, one thing that we need to address, though, is that hell is not the place of eternal punishment. People keep saying this. I don't know why they keep saying this. Hell is not the place of eternal punishment. You guys know this, right? People online get real tricked over this. Hell is a temporary place. The lake of fire is the permanent place. Those are two different places. Revelation talks about this, so don't let people mislead you by that. Anyways, well, in that sense, I guess heaven is kind of a temporary place too, because there'll be a new heavens and a new earth. So, however you want to look at that. Anyways, also it says that, after death comes the judgment. So in 1 Peter 3:18 is the part that this question is talking about. 3:18 says, "For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous." No, this is first. Is that right? Let's keep going. "That he might bring you to God." This is the right verse. "He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit." Okay, hold on. Stick with us a little longer. "In which he also went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in the past were disobedient, when God patiently waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. In it, a few, that is 8 people, were saved through water." So basically, people come to a bunch of different conclusions. One conclusion: so he went to people who had died and hadn't heard the word of Jesus. That's not what it's saying. Not what it's saying. Another thing that people say is, okay, so basically, people who were God followers but didn't accept Jesus because they couldn't accept Jesus, he had to go and tell them so that they could come. No. Another thing people say is, those are the two big ones. What it's actually saying is a lot simpler than that. I think we kind of make things more complicated than it needs to be. So first off, it says that Christ died physically. We're on board with him there. That's how verse 18 ends. Christ died physically. Okay. But he continued to live in the Spirit, right? He didn't cease to exist or something, right? Okay. All right. So then you can go to the next place and see that it was the Spirit of Christ. There's two interpretations. Interpretation 1, the Spirit of Christ was preaching through Noah back in those days to to his audience, and those people are now in prison. So it's just an issue of mistaking the order of events. So I'll read it again if that's your interpretation. And it would look something like this. Dead in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which, in the spirit, he also went and made proclamation to the spirits who are now in prison, who in the past were disobedient, when God patiently waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. The second interpretation is probably has a lot more steam to it, I would bet. And that's, where did I have it written down? That Jesus proclaimed his victory to the spirits, the demonic spirits. He, in that sense, preach would be that he didn't preach, he proclaimed. So the word has different ideas behind it, and when you read it in a translation that says preach, you're thinking like, having a service. That's not the idea. It can also be proclaimed. He proclaims something. So in that sense, and the credence for this view is that every single time that this word for spirits is used, is it's talking about angelic spirits and demonic spirits, not human spirits. And so there's good warrant for it there. So, in that case, he was just proclaiming his victory to the spirits. And another little way that this might be true is that Enoch proclaimed judgment to those spirits in Jewish tradition, not in the Bible. And so it would be following that same tradition, saying that Jesus went and proclaimed victory over them. So either way is acceptable. It's not going to, cost you your salvation. It's really just however you want to understand it. Both kind of seem to have some warrant to them. Why did Satan and the other angels challenge God? The simple answer is pride. It's always pride, isn't it? Now, the older you get, the less far-fetched the less we ask these kinds of questions because we understand. You know what I mean? It seems like the younger you are, the more you can't understand why they would be in heaven with God and still rebel. But the older you get, you're like, yeah, I can see me doing that. I've done some pretty stupid things. I would have done that, yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If Adam and Eve can be in the Garden of Eden and have it pretty good, and they can mess up, I mean, come on. So here's the thing. I think if we would just stop with the mysticism and address it like this, why did you disobey your mom and dad as a kid? Right? I mean, let's bring it down to reality here. You either thought you knew better. Ever been there? Or you don't want to listen. They told you not to touch the stove, and you're just like, I understand what you're saying, but I still think it'd be kind of fun. Or, you want to have fun, and your parents are obviously trying to ruin your good time. I mean, obviously they hate you. Why would they create you and then give you food and a place to sleep? And well, obviously they hate you. That's the only logical explanation. So, they're trying to stop you from having fun, so you have to rebel. It's the same basic concept. I mean, at the core of it, people and nature is always the same. You know what I mean? We get more complicated, we get older, but the core of who we are is the same. Like, as a 30-year-old, I see myself doing the same thing as I did as a 5-year-old. You know what I mean? And I look at myself and I say, there's still a kid in there somewhere. And when I'm dealing with stuff as a pastor, I'll see, 60, 70-year-olds do something, and I'm thinking, yep, the kid's still in there, alive and well. It's just, it's just our nature. We're not going to, cease to be, which is why it's so important and that we get the resurrected body, because we won't be able to sin. And we won't lose our place in heaven. This is why it's important. So moving on. There's some more questions. Question number 7. Why are we not married in heaven, and why does my husband get a free card not to deal with me anymore? That's good. That's good. So I'm going to give you the short answer first, and then I'm going to give you the longer reply that I sent to this person. So here's the short answer. You're still going to be in heaven with your spouse, assuming you're both saved. So it's not like they are done with you, like they don't know you anymore, okay? But with that being said, there's going to be no marriage in heaven, first off, because there's no purpose for a marriage. There's no reason for it. See, right now we live in aging bodies, and so we have to procreate to continue life. That's not going to be the situation in heaven. So, we don't need to procreate in heaven. We don't really need the function of marriage in heaven. The resurrected body is not made for fleshly passions. And I'm not just talking about sin. I'm talking about for the way that the world is here on earth. It's not made for that. Our body now is made for that. A good example of this is aging, right? Our body is made to age. The bodies that we have on right now, they are made to age. The resurrected body is not made to age. And I'll get to this in my longer reply, but in heaven, you're not going to be, ever asked the question, how old are we going to be in heaven? Have you ever asked that? The question fails to understand that the resurrected body doesn't work like that. You're talking in physical terms about a supernatural thing, and it just doesn't work like that. So I'll get to that in a longer answer in just a minute. But also, it's worth saying that the wicked people apparently seem to get a resurrected body too, just not the same type of resurrected body. Ours is a resurrected body for glory. Theirs is a resurrected body for, damnation or whatever you want to say. There's also a common misconception that in heaven we will be like an evolved being. So basically, right now there's male and female, but we will evolve into like an androgynous being. That's not the idea of the resurrected body. It's more of other. You know what I mean? Evolution says, okay, we're men and women, but we're becoming more. That's not what the Bible says. The resurrected body is something other. It's a different column. You know what I mean? So, let's see. Yeah, okay. So that's a short answer. There won't be marriage because the idea of marriage won't exist, and the need for it really won't, and the body's function won't function like that anymore. But the longer answer, and we are almost done with the questions. We got one more after this one. And I was going to give a longer reply tonight about this question, but then I realized my answer was already answered everything, so there's no reason to go anymore. Okay, so this is my longer answer. You're still going to know each other in heaven, according to 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18. And we will remember our life on earth, according to Luke 16:19-31, as other scripture too. There's this idea that we're going to just not remember anything, and that's just not true. That's not what the Bible teaches. But we will not be bound to people like we are now. What I mean by that is that our parents are special to us because they are our parents, but that doesn't appear to be a distinction that remains in the glorified body. See, when you were born in this earth, you have familial ties. Why do you care that your parent dies when you don't care that somebody else's parent dies? Because there's not that familial bond. Well, in the resurrection, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to be bound to these four people and no more. The family ties won't be there. So in that sense, your husband will still have to deal with you, as you will still know each other, and your distinct personality will still be there, but the oath will no longer exist, nor the physical body required for the oath's existence. But that takes us to, in heaven we will have a glorified body, according to 1 Corinthians 15, which is, do not have time to look at that tonight. That means that oaths are no longer binding, we are no longer capable of sinning, and our body is made differently. The body you have now was created with the intent of aging. It's natural. The new body won't be one created to age. People ask, how old will you be in heaven? But the question itself is silly because age won't be a thing in heaven. The glorified body is other. Our current bodies are made male and female, and each have their own weaknesses, but in heaven, apparently, we will not have that distinction of genitalia nor other factors, while still being ourselves. Mark 12:25 talks about this when it says that we will be as the angels. It doesn't say that we will become an angel, which is a huge misinterpretation. Sometimes people teach that basically we become angels when we die. Oh, heaven needed another angel. We're not going to be another angel. No, we're going to be as the angels in the sense that angels don't have male and female. Which God doesn't have male and female either. He's talked about it obviously in like androgynous form or terms and stuff, like his hand and stuff. But he doesn't really have a physical body. He doesn't really have genitalia. We understand this. It's just a way of talking. Our bodies are made to grow, reproduce, and then die. That's for physical existence. The glorified body is not meant to age and then die. The spiritual body is not made to have children and then die. You won't be married for the simple reason that marriage won't exist. We have earthly passions and earthly desires which are passing, but in heaven we will fully know and also fully know one another. There won't be that separation like there exists now. In other words, when you ask your husband, what are you thinking about? And they say, nothing. I humor myself. I'm not trying to describe a state of a constant, high. but rather the idea of something other that can't accurately be compared to the existing order of things. And Paul talks about this when he talks about the way that we can't even understand and comprehend what all that means. Marriage is a temporary creation created for the temporary order with our temporary bodies. Its purpose is for people to not get hurt with casual sex and to remain faithful and to model order and create a sustainable future for ourselves and our children. That's the purpose of marriage. And there's no reason, all those things I mentioned is not needed in heaven. Society is built on marriage. That won't be a thing in heaven. Oh, don't be like that. Don't you love how it just auto-scrolls for you? Golly, with these things. Yeah, that's it. Then there was another thing. She brought up the thing about transgenderism, which was a good conversation, but it's off topic, so we'll skip that. And here's one last thing I wanted to mention. In heaven, I'm not going to be affected by testosterone, and women will not be affected by estrogen. The burden of the period will be no more. There's no more cramps or anything like that. It's not going to exist. And you don't have to worry about pregnancy and pain and all that nonsense. So, I think the good outweighs the bad, but there's this idea that a lot of people have that it's a sad thing that they're not going to be married in heaven. It's not a sad thing. It's a thing of more fulfillment, not less fulfillment. See, you're not going to be less happy in heaven. You're going to be more happy. You're not going to be, have so many different limitations, which is a good thing. I know it seems like a bad thing because that sounds like it's going to hurt. Like, I don't want to have to say goodbye because we're used to the things. It's like this. Sometimes people get an injury and they get used to the injury. So they just kind of accept it as a part of their life and they move on with their life. And they're not used to it. And so when you start fixing the issue that they're having in their body, it hurts. And they're like, I don't like this. Because they got used to living with the pain. It's kind of the same thing with marriage. We're used to dealing with the pain. When we get into the resurrected body, not like that, Jason. But when we get to the resurrected body, we won't be living with the pain of how this world works. We'll be living in freedom and be free and go and conquer. And I'm just kidding. Obviously, I didn't mean it like that. But still. Okay, then the last question is actually broken up into two different questions. When doing a Bible study, should one go with a word-for-word translation or a thought-for-thought? So this is a common question that I hear that people, I think, have a wrong idea about translations. Okay? So let me just say, if you can at all, if you know Greek and Hebrew, start there, always start there. I'm assuming that most people don't know that, though, so we're going to move on and pretend like you don't know Greek and Hebrew. If you do not speak any of those ancient languages, then your best bet is to find a translation that you understand. That's your very first step right there. Find one you understand. So, with an addendum, stay away from the Passion Translation. That's not a translation. It's a joke. Do not read the New World Translation. That's Jehovah's Witness propaganda. And then there's another one you shouldn't read. Let me think of what it is. Well, those are the two big ones. But other than that, find one that you understand. So NIV, that's fine. KJV, that's fine. NKJV, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. As long as you understand it, that's the idea. Find a Bible translation that you understand, read that. Then, after you've done that, your next thing is to compare it to other translations to kind of see the idea that's getting across. I will say, though, with word-for-word translations, with thought-for-thought translations, they do the interpretation for you. So like the NLT, the New Living Translation, or the Message. They're not trying to be accurate to what the text says. They're trying to say it in such a way where you understand what it's saying. See what I mean? That's their purpose in it. Word for word is going to be harder to understand, though, like the NASB, the ESV. These are going to be translations that aren't really, especially if you had a hard time with high school. Okay, if you didn't graduate high school, the ESV is going to be just way too hard for you. The NASB tends to be a little bit too old-fashioned. Same with the KJV. If you have an okay education and you don't understand older things well, then the CSB is fine. NIV is fine. Those other ones I mentioned are fine. You just might have to be a little more intellectual to read them. But with that being said, there is really no such thing as a literal translation of the Word of God. People say this all the time. It is not true. Anybody who understands Greek or any ancient language will tell you the exact same thing. The reason why is because languages are not a code. They're not a one-for-one equivalent. It's not, what does this word mean? It's, what are the possible translations of this word in this context? There is no such thing as a literal one-for-one word equivalent. It does not exist. So I do want to be absolutely clear about that. That wasn't really the question, but I think it still needs to be addressed. Some translations are going to be closer to the idea, and some are going to be further apart, but there is no perfect translation. I mean, like, I like the NASB, but there are parts where I've looked at the translation and thought, nope, you missed it. That's really not the idea of what's being said here. And then there's other times, like the ESV does this, where it's a really good translation, but their bias will come out in certain parts. They obviously believe certain things about marriage, for instance, and so they're trying their hardest to translate in a way that's coherent with their theology, which is fine. That's a possible translation. So when you're doing a Bible study, what should you go with? You should always start with a Bible you understand and then look to other Bibles like that. You should always study the Bible for itself before you try and get commentaries involved. Always the Bible first. And you should never substitute Bible time for reading Christian books. Never do that. You can read Christian books, that's fine. I like C.S. Lewis myself. However, like I say, make sure that doesn't take the place of reading the Bible. You read the Bible first, and then if you want to read another book for your devotional, you go for it, right? So the second question, is there a reason why both Jacob and Israel are addressed or spoken to together? Sometimes it is within the same sentence or one right after another. Here are some examples I've seen, and I'll look at one of the examples because I already know exactly what she's saying in this one. Jeremiah, where are you, Jeremiah? There you are. Jeremiah 46:27 says, "But you, my servant Jacob, do not be afraid and do not be discouraged. Israel, for without fail I will save you from afar away, and your descendants from the land of their captivity. Jacob will return, have calm and quiet, with no one to frighten him." So, the Bible is not written as just a simple, especially in the prophets. They use poetry, they use metaphors, they use all kinds of different stuff. They don't just say something. Usually they don't just say something. I mean, sometimes they do, but usually not. I mean, when that one guy's talking to King David and he says, "You are the man," that's pretty straightforward, but usually the prophets don't do that. And so here in this section is a type of Hebrew poetry where the ideas will mirror each other, okay? So it looks something like this. Line 1, "You, my servant Jacob, do not be afraid." Line 2, "Do not be discouraged, Israel." So Jacob and Israel are comparative, and "do not be afraid" and "do not be discouraged," those are also comparative. See what I mean? It's saying this. Another way of saying that is they're saying the same thing two times. Okay? So whatever was said in the first is also being said in the second. So Jacob is Israel, and I mean, if you know your Jewish history, you're going to understand that maybe more. You're already going to understand that. Jacob was the name of the guy before he was named Israel by God. It's the same guy. So in this, he's talking about the nation of Israel as a he, Jacob, or Israel. It's just talking about the whole nation of Israel. It's just a poetical way of saying all Israel. So you could say it like this. I could paraphrase this and just say, "But you, my people, do not be afraid and don't be discouraged." It's the same idea it's getting across. Same thing. So you'll see another example of this is oftentimes, especially in the books of the prophets, you'll oftentimes see that Joseph and Ephraim are talked about in the same way. Ephraim sometimes is a symbol for all of Israel because he's the leading a tribe as Jacob blessed his children, and then he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh. So Ephraim became the dominant one. So oftentimes Ephraim will be a symbol for all of Israel. Sometimes it'll be Joseph will be a symbol for Ephraim or Ephraim and Manasseh, depending on the context. So it really is one of those things that it's a way of talking about groups of people in a poetical way. Melissa, what's your dad's name? Doug? Okay, it would be like if I said, "You, Melissa, O daughter of Doug." You know, we're talking about the same person, the same group of people. We're just using different ways of saying the same thing. It's a poetical thing. So that's really it. A stylistic variation, if you will. Yeah, and that pretty much summarizes everything that I wanted to remember that I got. Yeah, so, okay. That finishes up all the questions. Any questions about any of the answers or any other questions you guys had? Maybe you didn't get a chance to put one in there. Go ahead, Spencer. Are you asking why did they preach so much about hell and fire and brimstone? Okay. So in different times of church history, the church has focused on different things, and they've witnessed in different ways. They weren't wrong, and we aren't right. It was just a different time when they did things a different way. It's a method. And another way of saying this is the method changes, the message stays the same. So the message they were proclaiming is be saved through Jesus. Same message we proclaim, right? They just tended to harp, I guess you could say. Maybe that's a poor word because it kind of has a negative connotation to it. They tended to use that as a way of trying to witness people, trying to scare them into heaven, scare them straight. Get your life right or else. And it was good intentions. It was good intentions. You don't want people to go to hell. You care. Yeah, absolutely. Great intentions. In today's world, that doesn't work as well. Because we're at a different point in the hardening of America's heart, and also because people have that as a background. So let me say that a different way. Something works when you say it in power one time. If you say it in power for 100 times, it's not as effective. A good example of this is when the Great Awakening happened. Preaching became more personal. More people got saved. Well, then eventually it kind of lost its umph because everybody was doing it. See what I'm saying? Well, the same thing is true for the whole fire and brimstone. Nowadays, when you have a church that's preaching fire and brimstone, typically they're not going to be growing. They're going to be just a few elderly people who aren't really reaching out to the community. That's not always the case. And once again, talking about fire and brimstone is necessary. But there were just certain things that people harped on. Like, for instance, nowadays the church harps on, self-empowerment and, this different stuff about finding your purpose and not that stuff's wrong. It's just that, especially nowadays, they kind of overlook the idea of salvation a lot of times in their attempt to relate to people. And so they've kind of gone from one extreme to the other extreme. And, well, I guess that's a discussion, a political discussion. I shouldn't be tearing other pastors down. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying sometimes in church history, people go to one extreme or the other. And 50 years ago, the big thing that everybody was on was fire and brimstone. Not that it was bad, but that's what everybody's talking about. So, does that answer that? With probably more of my comments than you wanted. Any other questions? Yeah, it was. That's probably true too, yeah. Yeah. Also, another thing you notice is people have like this delusion in this culture where, and this is maybe a little bit off topic, I don't know, but they have the delusion in the culture that we're seeing now where it's like an over focus on what's fair and like this crazy idea like nothing bad's going to happen to me. Everything's going to be fine all the time, and I'm going to get my way all the time, and I'm just going to, we're going to have these riots and stuff, and it's going to change the world, and there's no idea about, but you're going to die one day, and I think sometimes this is due to, medicine and stuff. People think it's going to solve all the problems, but then you get to some diagnosis, and the doctor says there's nothing we can do, and you're just like, oh, it's this whole wake-up call. And it's something that you really see our whole culture kind of dealing with, not really understanding that, well, death is an imminent thing. Yeah. Take that for whatever it is,